Section 3 of Told After Supper. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Ruth Golding. Told After Supper by Jerome K. Jerome. Teddy Biffle's Story. Teddy Biffles told the first story. I will let him repeat it here in his own words. Do not ask me how it is that I recollect his own exact words, whether I took them down in shorthand at the time, or whether he had the story written out and handed me the manuscript afterwards for publication in this book, because I should not tell you if you did. It is a trade secret. Biffles called his story Johnson and Emily, or the Faithful Ghost, Teddy Biffles' Story. I was little more than a lad when I first met with Johnson. I was home for the Christmas holidays, and it being Christmas Eve, I had been allowed to sit up very late. On opening the door of my little bedroom to go in, I found myself face to face with Johnson, who was coming out. It passed through me, and, uttering a long, low wail of misery, disappeared out of the staircase window. I was startled for the moment. I was only a schoolboy at the time, and had never seen a ghost before, and felt a little nervous about going to bed. But on reflection I remembered that it was only sinful people that spirits could do any harm to, and so tucked myself up and went to sleep. In the morning I told the pater what I had seen. "Oh, yes, that was old Johnson," he answered. "Don't you be frightened of that. He lives here." And then he told me the poor thing's history. It seemed that Johnson, when it was alive, had loved, in early life, the daughter of a former lessee of our house, a very beautiful girl whose Christian name had been Emily. Father did not know her other name. Johnson was too poor to marry the girl, so he kissed her good-bye, told her he would soon be back, and went off to Australia to make his fortune. But Australia was not then what it became later on. Travellers through the bush were few and far between in those early days, and even when one was caught, the portable property found upon the body was often of hardly sufficiently negotiable value to pay the simple funeral expenses rendered necessary, so that it took Johnson nearly 20 years to make his fortune. The self-imposed task was accomplished at last, however, and then, having successfully eluded the police and got clear out of the colony, he returned to England, full of hope and joy, to claim his bride. He reached the house to find it silent and deserted. All that the neighbours could tell him was that, soon after his own departure, the family had, on one foggy night, unostentatiously disappeared, and that nobody had ever seen or heard anything of them since, although the landlord and most of the local tradesmen had made searching inquiries. Poor Johnson, frenzied with grief, sought his lost love all over the world, but he never found her, and after years of fruitless effort he returned to end his lonely life in the very house where, in the happy bygone days, he and his beloved Emily had passed so many blissful hours. He had lived there quite alone, wandering about the empty rooms, weeping and calling to his Emily to come back to him. And when the poor old fellow died, his ghost still kept the business on. It was there, the pater said, when he took the house, and the agent had knocked £10 a year off the rent in consequence. After that I was continually meeting Johnson about the place at all times of the night, and so indeed were we all. We used to walk round it and stand aside to let it pass at first, but when we grew at home with it, and there seemed no necessity for so much ceremony, we used to walk straight through it. You could not say it was ever much in the way. It was a gentle, harmless old ghost, too, and we all felt very sorry for it, and pitied it. The women folk, indeed, made quite a pet of it for a while. Its faithfulness touched them so. but as time went on it grew to be a bit a bore. You see, it was full of sadness. There was nothing cheerful or genial about it. You felt sorry for it, but it irritated you. It would sit on the stairs and cry for hours at a stretch, and whenever we woke up in the night one was sure to hear it pottering about the passages and in and out of the different rooms, moaning and sighing, so that we could not get to sleep again very easily. And when we had a party on, it would come and sit outside the drawing-room door and sob all the time. It did not do anybody any harm exactly, but it cast a gloom over the whole affair. "Oh, I'm getting sick of this old fool," said the pater one evening. The dad can be very blunt when he is put out, as you know, after Johnson had been more of a nuisance than usual, and had spoiled a good game of whist by sitting up the chimney and groaning till nobody knew what were trumps or what suit had been led even. "We shall have to get rid of him somehow or other. I wish I knew how to do it." "Well," said the mater, "depend upon it you'll never see the last of him until he's found Emily's grave. That's what he is after. You find Emily's grave and put him on to that, and he'll stop there. That's the only thing to do, you mark my words." The idea seemed reasonable, but the difficulty in the way was that we none of us knew where Emily's grave was any more than the ghost of Johnson himself did. The governor suggested palming off some other Emily's grave upon the poor thing, but, as luck would have it, there did not seem to have been an Emily of any sort buried anywhere for miles round. I never came across a neighbourhood so utterly destitute of dead Emilys. I thought for a bit, and then I hazarded a suggestion myself. "Couldn't we fake up something for the old chap?" I queried. "He seems a simple-minded old sort. He might take it in. Anyhow, we could but try." "By Jove, so we will!" exclaimed my father, and the very next morning we had the workmen in, and fixed up a little mound at the bottom of the orchard, with a tombstone over it, bearing the following inscription: "Sacred to the memory of Emily. Her last words were, 'Tell Johnson I love him.'" "That ought to fetch him," mused the dad, as he surveyed the work when finished. "I am sure I hope it does." It did. We lured him down there that very night, and, well, there, it was one of the most pathetic things I have ever seen, the way Johnson sprang upon that tombstone and wept. Dad and old Squibbins, the gardener, cried like children when they saw it. Johnson has never troubled us any more in the house since then. It spends every night now sobbing on the grave, and seems quite happy. "There still?" "Oh, yes. I'll take you fellows down and show you it next time you come to our place. 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. are its general hours. 10 to 2 on Saturdays." Interlude: The Doctor's Story. It made me cry very much, that story. Young Biffles told it with so much feeling. We were all a little thoughtful after it, and I noticed even the old Doctor covertly wipe away a tear. Uncle John brewed another bowl of punch, however, and we gradually grew more resigned. The Doctor, indeed, after a little while became almost cheerful, and told us about the ghost of one of his patients. I cannot give you his story. I wish I could. They all said afterwards that it was the best of the lot, the most ghastly and terrible, but I could not make any sense of it myself. It seemed so incomplete. He began all right, and then something seemed to happen, and then he was finishing it. I cannot make out what he did with the middle of the story. It ended up, I know, however, with somebody finding something, and that put Mr. Coombes in mind of a very curious affair that took place at an old mill, once kept by his brother-in-law. Mr. Coombes said he would tell us his story, and before anybody could stop him he had begun. Mr. Coombes said the story was called